Jacob was a pretty cool Bible guy who actually got to wrestle with God. It was kind of like a dad wrestling with his 5-year-old, but hey, Jacob held his own. My name is Tom Miller. I pastor Central Assembly in Superior, Wisconsin. This is Fuel for the Fire, Volume 829, Left with a Limp. Have you ever wrestled with God? I hope you have. We all need that kind of encounter with the one who loves us enough to wrestle with us in our confusion, our rebellion, and our chaos. Jacob had been a deceiver from literally day one. He was born trying to supplant his twin brother as the firstborn in Genesis 25:26, an auspicious beginning to be sure. Later in life, he exploited his brother's hunger to gain his birthright and then duped their father into giving him the blessing reserved for the firstborn. The subsequent years would take Jacob a lot of places. He would experience more conflict and even came out on the short end of what some would say was a bit of his own medicine. In Genesis 32, finding himself at a crossroad, Jacob wrestled with God until the break of day in a place called Peniel. The Bible tells us Jacob wouldn't give up, so God touched the hollow of his thigh, and from that moment on, Jacob was left with a limp. When we get to our Peniel, the place where we're desperate enough to wrestle with God, we will be confronted with the extreme conflictedness of both who we are and who we can be. The struggle of life and the ultimate experience of wrestling with God can leave us with a limp. We may be left with a scar. The scar may be physical or it may be emotional. But remember this, a scar is just the reminder of a wound now healed. As the wrestling match was drawing to a close, God asked, "What is thy name?" And he said, Jacob. It is significant that Jacob had to acknowledge who he was. Jacob was admitting he was a swindler. And then God said, "Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel." It meant Prince of God. He had a new name and a new identity, but he was left with a limp. He would never forget he wrestled with God. That's what our scars can do for us. They remind us we encountered God. He touched our life. He changed our name. And while we were left with a limp, we'll never be the same. That's the way I see it. And that's a little fuel for the fire. And remember, I love you guys.